Hello, welcome to another lesson. In this lesson, we are going to be performing our first real SQL injection attack. We are going to trick the database into giving us usernames and passwords that we shouldn't have access to. But before we proceed, I would like to give a brief explanation on what SQL injection is in case you're new to that. SQL injection is when you insert malicious SQL code into an input field to manipulate the database. You can think of it like this. Imagine a bouncer at a club checking IDs. Normally, you're supposed to show your ID before you get into the club. But instead of doing that, you slip him a note that says, "Let everyone in." That is basically what SQL injection is all about. And it is what we are going to be doing to the database. So in summary, what we are going to be doing in this lesson is that we are going to be entering malicious SQL code into input fields, and we are going to be tricking the database to give us the information that we shouldn't have access to normally. So let's get right into it. The first thing we're going to do is to start our virtual machine, and now we have our Kali running. And the next thing we want to do is to open our terminal emulator. And for this, what we are going to do first is to start our MySQL and Apache 2. Because for this demo, we are going to be using DVWA, and DVWA is relying on MySQL and Apache to run. So the first thing we are going to do is to do sudo systemctl start MySQL. You enter the password, and then you do the same for Apache 2. After that, the next thing you do is to open your browser and then log in. Now we're going to type in the URL to our DVWA. This is the URL. Now we're going to hit enter. And now this is the login page. You're going to type in admin and then password as password. Now we gain access. Now that we have access, if you check this side, you're going to see SQL injection and SQL injection blind. We are going to start with SQL injection first. So we're going to select this. And prior to that, we can come to the DVWA security and then select low. We are starting with low, then click on submit, and then come back here to select SQL injection. Now for this, they are requesting for user ID. We need to type in our user ID. But let's assume we don't know the user ID, or even if we know the user ID, the main aim we want to do is to dump some data from the database. That is, we want to get some data that we shouldn't normally have access to. So to do that, we need to first know how the system works first. And one of the ways to do that is to type in some random input, like maybe type in 1 to see if this would work. And then you can see that 1 is a valid ID. For user ID 1, I'm having the first name to be admin, and then I'm having the surname to be admin as well. But what if I type in something like 10? So will that still work? So that means there's no user with user ID 10. So if I type something like 9 to see, there's nothing like 9 as well. Type in 8, then type in maybe 5. Let's see. Okay, we have 5. So let's type in 6. Then definitely all the users that is in this database stopped at 5. We already know that the user ID range is in between 1 and 5. Now we have that information. But let's assume we do not know what the user ID is, because some user IDs are not just 1, 2, some are alphanumeric, some are even having characters, so you might not really know what the user ID looks like. And if that is happening, then there must be a way for us to get what the user ID really looks like. That is, get the data directly from the database. Now, that is what we are going to do now. Let's assume we are thinking of a random number, maybe 20. So if you are typing in 20, we already know that 20 does not exist. Like, there is no user with user ID 20. So if we type in that and then we hit submit, we'll see that there's nothing like that. So let's now use OR. OR is a logic gate. And what it does is that it takes in the input, and the final output will be true if any of the inputs are true. And what does that mean? If the user ID is equals to 20 or 1 equals to 1, then that might give me something. If the system is vulnerable to such an attack, then it might give me an access. So what I'm trying to say in essence is that if user ID is equals to 20, then give me the data in the database, or 1 is equals to 1. And if you look at it mathematically, 1 is equals to 1. So it can take the aspect of 1 equals to 1 and then use that to dump the data for me. Now I can say that get me the data for a user that is having user ID 20 or 1 equals to 1. So how can I do that? I can just add a quotation mark here, and I would now type in or, then I can now type in this. So what I'm trying to do here is this. I'm trying to tell the system that gets me the user with user ID 20 or 1 equals to 1. And if you look at this, you're going to see that I'm having a single quotation mark here, then space, then or, then space, then single quotation mark, then I'm adding my 1, then after that I'm having a single quotation mark equals to single quotation mark, then 1. Now if you look at this, you're going to see that it is the equals to here that is carrying the quotation marks, or 2 is carrying the quotation mark, but with some spaces at 2 sides. So once I hit submit, you can see that it's dumped all the data in the database for me. What is happening here is that there is no user with ID 20, but 1 equals 1 is true. And since 1 equals 1 is true, it gave me the data. It is even giving me the list to all the users in the database. So this is an example of SQL injection. Now we can proceed to dump more data. Another thing we can use is union. Let's say we want to try 12 this time around, and I'm saying 12, then I'm saying union select null, then version, and I can just try to comment the rest. I can either use 2 hyphens or I use a hash. Either of the two works. And now I can submit this. And the moment I submit this, you can see that it is showing me the version of the database. Now I'm seeing 11.8.3 MariaDB. And if you try to open a new tab to research about this particular version of database, version of MariaDB, you might start seeing that it is vulnerable to an attack. So I can type in vulnerability, and this is sometimes how to do some pen testing. This is how some pen testers do their work. You get something and then you research about it. And if you look at this, you can see that this has a known vulnerability. You can see known vulnerability associated with MariaDB 11.8.3, and you can see some of those vulnerabilities. CVE means common vulnerability and exposure. It is something that helps us to give an ID to a particular vulnerability. You can read more about that on their website. Now you can see this, you can see this, you can see this. We can see like many vulnerabilities that are common or associated with this particular version of MariaDB. And that means that we have discovered something, which means that from here, we can even do some more exploitation. But before we end this lesson, it is okay to understand what is happening behind the scene. So let me explain. When you are typing in something else, for instance, I'm typing in 1. What is happening behind the scene is this. The system is getting this 1 from me and then is now asking the database through the backend to know if user ID 1 exists. So what is going to the database is a SQL query that looks like select all from the user table where user ID equals 1. That is the statement that is going to the database. So the database is going to see that statement and then look through the entire database. At first, it's going to consider the user table. And then once it gets to the user table, it will look into the user ID column to get the user ID and check if the user ID 1 exists. If it does exist, then it's going to fetch the data for that particular user. If we are tweaking it and we are adding 1 or 1 equals 1, what is happening at that point is a statement is being sent to the database, and the statement will look like this. Select first name, comma, last name from users table where user ID equals 1 or 1 equals 1. And since 1 always equals 1, this condition is always true. So it returns all the users in the database. And what this means is that the website did not validate our input, so it just accepted our malicious SQL code, and that is the vulnerability. So what are the lessons we can draw from this? The first one is never trust user input. We could see that this website trusted whatever we typed and sent it straight to the database. The second lesson is that input validation is critical. That is, the application should have checked if we actually entered a number, not SQL code. Number 3, to prevent against SQL injection or this kind of trick, use prepare statements or parameterized queries, because modern secure code now use parameterized queries that prevent SQL injection. And the last lesson I will say is the vulnerability is everywhere in the real world. You can see how we did it here. One can try it on another system and it will work. And please, this is a disclaimer. This video is just meant for educational purposes. SQL injection is in the owasp top 10 for a reason. It is super common. So it is something many organizations and businesses are experiencing, and you should not try it on any system without proper approval. In our next lesson, we are going to try SQL injection at medium security level where there is more protection, and we are going to learn how to bypass that too. That's all for this lesson. If you're yet to subscribe to our YouTube channel, please do that now. Also like, comment, and share this video. Thank you, and see you in the next lesson.